Today, we're asking big questions of the teams hoping to compete with Ohio State. Oregon was long thought of as a national championship favorite for much of the 2024 season. They have a little quarterback competition going on as they try to rise back to the top in their second year of Big Ten play. You also have Minnesota, who lost both coordinators in the offseason. How will they respond? And can Northwestern's offense finally step up to the plate? We are asking big questions of the Wildcats. And to do so, we've got our football crew of Josh Pate alongside our Super Bowl champ, Bryant McFadden, here to answer those questions surrounding our Big Ten teams taking the podium today. Fellas, we start with the Ducks, who went 13-1 last year, but of course that one loss proved fatal when they got blown out by Ohio State in the college football playoff. So Josh, if you're Dan Lanning and you hope to get this team back to the top of the mountain, what questions are you asking of this team?
Well, I'm asking about my team's ability to finish, but that's sort of arbitrary down the road a little ways. When we're talking about personnel, B-Mac, they had to go hit the portal hard for offensive linemen. Now, you and I spoke yesterday, and I'll reiterate it at least one time today. Oregon is one of the handful of programs that we just have learned to give benefit of the doubt to. So they go make a move, and whether you've heard of the names they get, most of the time you have. But even if you haven't heard of the names, you just say, well, Lanning's taking them. Lanning's trusting them. Like, they must be pretty good. But I look at a lot of the contenders. Oregon happens to be the one we're talking about right now, and how different the roster depth situation is right now for contenders. This has got to work. Like the offensive linemen, 3 of the 5 starters I think they're going to roll out there are from the portal. It's got to work. Everyone's going to talk about Dante Moore here today. I'm focused on who's playing in front of him, who's protecting him, who's giving him time to hopefully make all the throws we're accustomed to Oregon making.
And you talked about the offensive side. I'm attacking the offensive side also with my biggest question with the Oregon Ducks. Will Stein continue his quarterback magic that we've seen over the last few seasons with Oregon? You talk about Dan Lanning, he's been receiving so much praise, deserving so. But a lot of praise should be also pointed to Will Stein. When you look at what he's done since becoming the offensive coordinator and the quarterback coach, we see nothing but high-level play coming from that said position. Remember years ago with Bo Nix, right? Look at what Bo Nix did under Will Stein. Completed almost 80% of his passes. Outstanding numbers that led him to be a high first-round draft pick in the NFL. A year ago, Dylan Gabriel was already a made man in college football. But what he did with Will Stein, he kind of fine-tuned his skills that led to an outstanding year, once again, for the team, and as an individual led to him being drafted in the 3rd round by the Cleveland Browns. Now in comes a new quarterback to the University, Dante Moore. He's been around for some time, of course, formerly with UCLA, but we have yet to see the consistency that we thought we would see with Dante at UCLA. Can Will Stein continue his quarterback magic? Because of what he's done with the previous 2 quarterbacks has been phenomenal. That led to really good years for Oregon. If they have any opportunity to reach those aspirations, they have to get great play from the quarterback position, and it starts and it stops with the coaching of Will Stein.
You know, also to just follow on something that happened in recruiting season. They signed a 5-star quarterback. He's on campus for like 5 minutes, comes in there during bowl prep, sees Dante Moore. He hit the exit door, and I think a lot of what led to him hitting the exit door, Haley, was putting his eyeballs on Dante Moore and realizing there's probably not immediate playing time here for me. Yeah.
It's interesting, too, when you talk about Dante Moore, Josh, because with or without that 5-star signing, Dante Moore set to become the 3rd different starting quarterback in the last 3 years for Dan Lanning out at Oregon. So the quarterback coach, all of the things trying to come together there when it comes to the quarterback. Going to be some big questions there as they open the season against Montana State August 30th. Let's talk about Minnesota next, gentlemen. They capped off their 8-5 season with a big win over Virginia Tech in one of the best bowl games out there, the Duke Mayo Bowl. By the way, they're now 6-0 in postseason games under P.J. Fleck. But BMAC kind of feels like this team needs to take another step forward when it comes to the Big Ten. They were just 5-4 last year. So what questions are you asking of Minnesota as this team tries to do that and take that next step in the conference?
Well, Haley, for me, I'm targeting the offensive side of the football field. When you look at having a new quarterback, it's imperative to have playmakers surrounding that said quarterback. So who is going to emerge at the wide receiver spots for Minnesota? They lost their top 2 pass catchers from a year ago. The returning pass catcher in terms of receiving yards is Darius Taylor. He had 350 yards. He plays the running back position. Anytime your returning pass catcher is a running back, that's not a good situation. So number one, trying to determine who's going to emerge to be a wide receiver, a consistent guy, not to mention having the depth behind those said players as well. They're going to have to rely on some transfers. So that's okay. That's the new landscape in college football. But the consistency needs to be there, because you look at what they've done in years past, we know they're going to win ball games. We know they're going to compete. But they're trying to get to the next step. It's about having skillful playmakers surrounding whoever the quarterback will be for Minnesota to be able to have the best coming from that said quarterback when he gets the football into his playmaker hands.
Look, PJ Fleck's not in our room right now, so we can just talk freely and openly. I don't know that there is a next step for them to take. Everyone just assumes that when you're somewhere, it's logical that you want to take the next, rung up the ladder, and sometimes that happens. How do I know that Minnesota's capable of that? And also, there have been some really interesting coordinator moves here the last few cycles. They lost Joe Rossi, they lost Kurt Shiraka, and now Corey Heatherman goes to Miami. And maybe for a premier program, you're used to losing coordinators to go be head coaches. That's not what's been happening here. And also, I don't know if I just blindly trust Minnesota, as good as PJ's been at backfilling at the coordinator position. I don't just blindly trust that you can continue to hit and hit and hit there. And you're replacing some defensive stars. So for everyone who asks, can you take the next step, I'll counter with, what if this was the apex? We see it all the time in college football.
Yes, we do.
You go back and look 3 years ago, and I didn't know it at the time, but that was as good as that program was going to get. Well, maybe it's not a positive statement, I know, but maybe that's where Minnesota is. They've been a really, really hard-nosed, tough program last few years.
And I'll say this to your point, Josh. That was very, very informative. But when you look at the fan base for Minnesota, if there is no next step, I think they're okay with it, because the saving grace has been postseason success. That has been the saving grace for Minnesota. He's been very, very well in winning bowl games, whatever bowl game it is, the Mayo Bowl, it doesn't matter. They've competed, and that has been a saving grace for them, because when you look at the landscape of the Big Ten, they're in that middle of the pack in terms of tiers. And if you're in the middle of the pack, if you're a Minnesota fan, you're okay with that, because the alternative could be worse.
Yeah.
You could be a bottom tier level team where you don't have any aspirations of just seeing any competitive football. So to your point, if there is no next step, I don't think they're going to ring the alarms, because when you look at what PJ has done, he's done a pretty good job considering everything that has been surrounding him.
Yeah, just to hammer down on the postseason success as well, B-Mac, they've won 8 consecutive bowl games. 6 of those have come under PJ Fleck. And then when you look at some of the losses last year, 4 of Minnesota's 5 losses were by 7 points or less. So maybe the next step here is getting past that, right? Not letting close games slip away like we saw last year. Only time will tell as they open up their season against Buffalo later this August. Let's pivot and talk about Northwestern, gentlemen. And Josh, I'm looking at our rundown here that we've got going on for the show, and I noticed that B-Mac gave us his big question for Northwestern, but your line is still blank. So I'll leave it up to you two here. B-Mac, you can either go first and share what you're asking about Northwestern this year, or Josh, you can let us know what you're thinking when it comes to the Wildcats, who, by the way, had just 2 wins in the Big Ten last year.
So they told me that I got one phone-a-friend.
Yeah.
My friend is Tom Fornelli in this case. He is my Northwestern authority. And I had to wait for him to get in the room this morning. And so I said, Fornelli, what are we going with on Northwestern? He said, transfers, 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 transfers. So that's my question, B-Mac.
Yeah.
Excuse me, that is our question. Tom and I want to know, transfers. Are the transfers, and what is the real Northwestern? Is it 8-4? Is it 4-8? We're going into year 3 under a staff change here. So transfers, Haley, I'm told, is my big, big point of emphasis.
And you talked about, 2023, I think that was David's first year, David Brom's first year with Minnesota. He was the talk of the conference because they won 8 games. So the expectations were pretty marginal considering the first season success.
Coach of the year.
Coach of the year in the Big Ten. And then they flatlined tremendously in 2024. And the reason why is because of how horrendous the offense was. And that's my burning question for Northwestern. I have some numbers for you guys just to back my question in terms of how ugly and horrible their offense was. 17 points, you see it there. Second fewest in the Big Ten, 128th, there you have it, in FBS. When you look at only 7 passing touchdowns in 2024, tied for 3rd worst in FBS. They completed 39% of red zone opportunities, tied for 3rd worst in FBS. They had 18 turnovers in 24, at the bottom half of the Big Ten, compared to only 9 turnovers in 2023. So you talk about what transpired between 2023 and 2024, there you have it. Their offense was an automobile with no transmission. If you know anything about automobiles, you can have a good engine, but if you have no transmission, you can pat the gas, you ain't going nowhere.
It is certainly.
They were patting the gas and not going anywhere Northwestern in 2024. Can they get the transmission right?
So the gas patter offense, 2025.
No question.
Got to have a good transmission.
All right.
Good transmission.
So still some questions for Northwestern. By the way, guys, just for you, David Braun just finished his second season at Northwestern. So, BMAC, you were right on there, and he did win Coach of the Year in 2023 after winning the Las Vegas Bowl in 23. So we will continue to ask questions of Northwestern. Fellas, sit tight. We're going to do the exact same thing on the other side as Big Ten Media Days continue out in Las Vegas. The Nittany Lions kicking off our college football campaign on CBS with a renewed sense of urgency to bring home a title. Is this the year Penn State does it? We'll ask our experts next. Welcome back to HQ Spotlight. Two teams stand atop the Big Ten preseason standings ahead of the 2025 season. One is the reigning national champions, and the other the team many experts expect to win it all this year. Of course, the expectations for Penn State always sky high, even at media days out in Las Vegas. But this year, that pressure somehow feels a little bit bigger as James Franklin still looks for that national title. There's a lot of questions to ask about the Nittany Lions, and so we're back on HQ Spotlight with our crew in Vegas, Josh Pate and Bryant McFadden, getting us ready for the Big Ten season on CBS. BMAC, I want to talk to you about Penn State. I was listening to your conversation with Danny Kanell earlier on HQ when you were talking about Drew Aller and why he can be the quarterback, the chosen one, if you will, out at Penn State. You said as a cornerback, you don't like playing against a quarterback like Drew Aller if he's playing at his highest potential, but that's kind of the question when it comes to Penn State for you, right? Is that if Drew Aller can take that next step?
Yes, can he live up to the billing? He's one of the more prolific quarterbacks in college football, clearly the best quarterback in the Big Ten, future first-round type of talent. But I need to see him live up to the billing. And the issue with that is when you look at Penn State's overall talent, right? I think they have the most experience. They're the most talented team in the Big Ten. But their championship aspirations starts with Drew Aller. And can he live up to the billing against high-level play? A year ago, against top-5 opponents, they were 0-3. But also in those 0-3 outings, Drew Aller only completed around 50% of his passes. He threw 4 interceptions and 3 touchdowns. That's not winning football. So when you look at their schedule, you get Oregon early in the year at home. You get Ohio State in November. If you're Drew Aller, number one, the quarterback matchup is in favor of you, regardless who Oregon trots out on the football field. The same could be said for Ohio State at the quarterback position. Number two, you got a ball. You got a ball because in those said matchups, he did not reach the level that we know he could reach. So right now, that's my question. It's about Drew Aller. You have everything else. You got talent everywhere. You got running backs. You got everything. It's about the 5-star quarterback living up to the billing and performing like a 5-star in 5-star matchups.
He's a really likable kid, so I hope everything you're saying is right. If I were to go glass half empty, if we were on a debate stage, I would say if that kid was a 3-star coming out of high school, everything else was the same, would you be expecting him to level up this year? Because I think a lot of people would look at him in that case and say, yeah, that's been a 4-star even. That's been about a 4-star effort. It's because of the high school billing, which I agreed with at the time, so I'm not knocking it in retrospect, that everyone expects a level up. But I'll say the same thing about this player that I said about Minnesota. How do you know that's not just who he is? So my question is the guys he's throwing the ball to, they really made a conscious effort in the portal to go attack as much as they could, because that's been, you know, the one glaring area where when you look at Penn State, they didn't have difference makers at, and that's the wide receiver position. And because of that, defenses haven't had to respect their ability to throw the ball. No one said to themselves, Penn State's going to beat us throwing the ball if we're not careful this Saturday. They may beat you running the ball 58 times, but not throwing the ball. Can they do that? If they're in pressure leverage situations in fourth quarters at home against Oregon, it's 24-23, you trail, you need a drive. Can you make a couple of throws? Do you have the guys who can win 50-50 matchups? That would be the difference. We're talking about fractions of inches here of the difference between them being able to get it done in big games and get over the hump versus what they have been. What they have been is very good. I think a more dynamic presence in the wide receiver room could push him over that hump.
And you know what, to piggyback on that point, when I look at some of the high-level quarterbacks that we've seen in years past, they've made the wide receivers look better. Mm-hmm. That's what great quarterbacks do, especially on the collegiate level. When you're a guy at the quarterback position, whoever's around you, you make them look better. And it happens at the highest level as well in the National Football League. So if if we're visualizing Drew Aller as that type of quarterback, future first rounder coming up, it's his job, to your point, those transfers, yes, we know they can ball, but it's his job to make sure they look better than what they've actually displayed throughout their collegiate career, because you're supposed to be him at that said position. And we're gonna see, if you look at the beginning of the schedule, if they want to go ahead and pat the gas and kind of fine-tune their skill set, they got games to do so before they get to Oregon early in the first half of the season.
Yeah, they're going to kick off our CBS coverage against Nevada on August 30th, so we're excited to see that one. I will mention that Penn State has about 4 wide receivers and a tight end that they added this offseason, whether it's transfer portal, high school recruiting, whatever it is. The big departure, I think, is Tyler Warren. A lot of people are forgetting how impactful he was for Drew Aller last year, so we'll see if he can make those adjustments. Let's talk about Washington next, fellas. They finished their first season under Jed Fish with a losing record. That was the first time that's happened since Jimmy Lake's final season back in 2021. However, they replaced both coordinators. They've got 8 players returning, 5 on offense, and maybe some new offense here. Josh, what are you looking at? What's the biggest question you have for the Huskies?
There's a lot of reason to be optimistic here. So I believe in them. I believe in the year 2 bump. I believe in all the stuff on the periphery, the bumper sticker stuff, the fortune cookie stuff. That all sounds good. Well, why does it happen? To me, if it happens with Washington, it'll be because people have slept on their quarterback, and he'll be good, and I'm really high on him. But the ability to run the ball, I think, will uptick. The ability to stop the run, I think, will uptick. And that's really what bit them. And if you don't possess that, that's just the kind of team that shows up and they win 38-16 one Saturday and then get beat 38-16 the next Saturday, because the inability to do that consistently makes things so wildly inconsistent. So if they can do those things, you're seeing the new coordinators there, if they can do those things, I feel really good that the other tumblers will fall into place.
And for me, the bigger question mark for me with Washington, number one, Jed Fish, I really love his style of coaching. I think he's a very, very intriguing coach, but very, very good at what he does. But will the 2024 road woes continue? That's what led to them having a below 500, not a winning record a year ago, was the road woes. They were 0-5 on the road, tied for the worst in this century for Washington at that state university. They were horrible. So you look at the road games this season: at Washington State on CBS, at Maryland, at Michigan, at Wisconsin, at UCLA. Outside of at Michigan, you would think they could have a better outcome than what they did not display a year ago. They were 0-5 on the road. It was the Jekyll and Hyde syndrome with Washington. When you watch them at home, you saw inspired play. Remember, they beat Michigan at home. They have won 20 straight at home. Yes, they have one of the top 3 winning streaks in college football. Yes, 20 straight. But it's something about Washington, especially a year ago, in Big Ten play and just in totality, they did not play any inspired football on the road. They have a very, very winnable road schedule this season outside of Michigan. If they can play better on the road, we might see a very, very entertaining season for the Huskies.
If you're not going to Autzen and you're not going to the Shoe and you're not going to Happy Valley, you've gotten about as good a draw as you're going to get on the road in the Big Ten.
No question.
Just to hammer home your point, B-Mac, they were 6-0 at home when it comes to winning games, but on the road they were 0-7. That is both the road and neutral sites there. And to take it a step further, that Michigan game you were referring to, it was the only game that they won against an AP-ranked opponent this year. They were 1-3 against the AP. So some big questions to ask of Washington, both on the road and just in general here. Let's wrap up our conversation with Wisconsin, fellas. Another team that had a losing season in the Big 12. Their 22 straight seasons with a winning streak was snapped. They missed a bowl game as well. Josh, when I think about Wisconsin, though, it takes me a second to remember that Luke Fickell took over this program, that there's a lot of talent on this roster. Kind of just feels like they're lacking some identity going into 2025.
You and me both. I mean, it's really, really mind-boggling to think that my biggest question for a Luke Fickell Wisconsin team, those are two entities that seem tailor-made for each other. That my biggest question would be in year 3 and beyond, what's your identity? I mean, that's the last question that I thought. I never thought I'd ask it about him at Cincinnati or Wisconsin, wherever he is. And then especially if that guy, knowing his DNA, goes to a place like Wisconsin knowing their DNA. But you remember when he took the job, you know, I remember sitting down with him at that first Big Ten Media Days, and they'd hired Phil Longo on the offensive coordinator side, and he said, we just got to shake things up. We got to be more progressive. We got to be more innovative. It's going to look radically different offensively. And he was right that it looked different, but man, it was different for the worse. And so now, I mean, Jeff Grimes comes in. All right, so says all the right things. He's got an MO. He's got a track record. It's no mystery what they're going to try and get back to doing. But we are seeing several places across the country, from Wisconsin to Oklahoma to USC to LSU. They're big names that got hired at programs and made very, very just fundamentally flawed coordinator hires out of the gate. So then you find yourself having to course correct 2 or 3 years in, and then you find yourself saying, even if I just made the right move, will my people give me the patience that they would have given me if I made this hire at the outset? It's a mixed bag of yes, no there.
And you talk about mixed bag. I don't know exactly how you would grade this Luke Fickell, Wisconsin situation today, because it seems like the margin hasn't really been reached, especially a year ago. You talk about having a losing season. They don't do that. Regardless of not having championship aspirations there at Wisconsin, they have aspirations of winning the games they're supposed to win and being competitive. And we didn't see that a year ago. So the bigger question for me with Wisconsin, what would this – we expected to see what we think we will see from Jeff Grimes in his offense, but will he be successful in doing so, right? Because if you look at what he did while he was at Kansas, 2 things we knew about Jeff Grimes when he was at Kansas. They were going to run the football well, and they were going to be outstanding in third down opportunities. Because of the success in running the football, they got into manageable third down moments, and they capitalized on those said moments. If you can do those 2 things in football, you're going to be in scoring. You're going to have scoring opportunities, and you're going to be in moments to win ball games. So can he instill that same mindset, that foundation there to run the football, get back to being the old Wisconsin? Once upon a time, Wisconsin was known for high-level offensive linemen, big bruisers, great running back play, the Melvin Gordons of the world, the Jonathan Taylors of the world. That's what we grew up watching. Ron Dane. Quality running backs that can run the football behind physical offensive linemen. Can Jeff Grimes instill that mindset there in Wisconsin to be able to get in scoring range to hopefully have a better outcome in 2025 than what they did not have in 2024?
Yeah, B-Mac, you mentioned it. Don't want to have back-to-back losing seasons. If they do, though, it'd be the first time since the early 90s. They opened the season against Miami, Ohio. And then they face Alabama in September. So we'll do a temperature check maybe after that Alabama game and see how we're feeling about Wisconsin. Fellas, appreciate the time. One more day of Big Ten Media Days for you both. Enjoy all of the action and the sights and sounds there. As the countdown to college football is officially on here at CBS, the action returning to our platforms every Saturday at 3:30 Eastern for Big Time on CBS Sports. We'll also have your pregame on CBS Sports HQ beginning at 3 o'clock. That streaming on Paramount+. Big Ten Media Days rolling along out of Vegas. Today we're hearing from the reigning Big Ten champs, Oregon and, of course, Penn State. So Oregon won the Big Ten championship to start 13-0 for the first time ever, and we're wondering what they learned from their early exit in the CFP with a new quarterback under center, likely in Dante Moore. Meanwhile, for James Franklin and Penn State, Drew Aller is back, and they're looking to learn from their CFP semifinal appearance where they lost to Notre Dame. So there's a new DC in town for Penn State. They're hiring Jim Knowles away from Ohio State to be their defensive coordinator. Ohio State, they're the favorites to win the Big Ten at plus 185, but not too far behind. We have Penn State at plus 230 and then Oregon at plus 340. So we want to welcome in our college football analyst, Brandon Marcello, who is joining us from Las Vegas. Brandon, great to see you. And we're going to play a little game, kind of. We're doing Big Ten Media Days buy or sell. So we're going to throw out a statement about a couple of these teams. You got to tell us if you're buying or selling this statement. We're starting off a little spicy in terms of the defending champs here, Ohio State. The statement is Ohio State misses the college football playoff.
Oh, sell that. They've got the most talented roster in the country, according to the Blue Chip Ratio, with 89%, I believe, 4- and 5-star players. Listen, I know they lose about 7 or maybe 8 stars, depending on the lineup you see on defense. But offensively, they still do return a lot of production. They got to figure some things out at running back, but they feel like they've got 3 running backs that could be 3-down guys. And then at quarterback, I think what Julian's saying, he's going to be someone who's going to be able to deliver the ball, take some pressure off of those running backs as well, because he's still got Jeremiah Jeremiah Smith. He's still got the best player in the entire country, along with Tate at receiver, who I believe is ready to step up into that role and be one of those top leading receivers there. And that offensive line is still going to be good despite losing a couple of guys from last season, but they have a lot of experience there because players had to step up in place of injured players last year. I really like Ohio State this year. Once again, they probably will be a little bit slower to start the year defensively because they have to return so many starters. Plus, you lose Jim Knowles as your defensive coordinator and you get Matt Patricia. They're going to have some growing pains defensively. I don't know how they repeat a top 5 performance defensively, but that offense is still going to be explosive, and they still have the depth to contend week after week in the Big Ten. They're going to make the college football playoff once again.
All right, and they have a tough test early on facing Texas, certainly a game that we're circling there for week 1. Let's go to USC because the conversation for the Trojans has largely been about Lincoln Riley. How hot is his seat after they're coming off of a 7-6 season? So the statement here for USC is USC fails to make a bowl game. Are you buying or selling that?
I'm going to sell that. I mean, Lincoln Riley just doesn't have losing seasons. I know it's been a downward trajectory really since year 1 there at USC, but they're starting to get that type of depth they need there to contend. I also think that it is an issue for them because they have to travel so far across the country to play in the Big Ten these days. I think that affected them a little bit last year. But again, they've got the depth that they have built. I also think that they're building into next season, 2026. I know no one at USC wants to hear that right now, but they've got the class that could be number 1 in the country going into next year, but they've already got some really good depth. The schedule is going to be very difficult for them, but I like what they're doing at quarterback with the transfer there. I like them. I think they get to a bowl game. They're probably, though, going to be a 7 to 8 win team, which is not going to set very well with the fans at USC. But again, I'm saying hold some patience there because I think they're going to be really, really good in 2026.
I was going to say 7 or 8 win season is certainly not what USC fans want to hear. Let's go over to Penn State. So far, by the way, Brandon's not buying anything so far. We got 2 sells on the board, but Penn State.
I'm low on money, man. I'm in Las Vegas. How can I buy anything?
Exactly. Step away from the slots, Brendan Marcello. Let's go to Penn State because they have the second best odds to win the Big Ten behind Ohio State. So the prediction here is that Penn State wins the Big Ten. And you were actually buying this.
Oh, I'm absolutely buying it. I think that much like Ohio State last year with Ryan Day proving doubters wrong after losing against Michigan and never being able to really win a big game and then winning the national championship, Penn State and James Franklin is going to do the same this year. James Franklin is someone who's going to be much maligned because of his record against top 5 opponents. He's 1-15 at Penn State in his career, 1-18 overall going back to his days at Vanderbilt. So everybody's always going to kind of throw bombs at him. This is a program that's always been top 10 type, but they haven't been in the top 5 in the preseason since 1999. It's been a very long time. They'll be in the top 5 this preseason. They've got the most talented, I believe, and experienced roster in the Big Ten this year. And for the first time since 2009, a program in the FBS brings back a 3,000-yard passer in Drew Aller and multiple 1,000-yard rushers with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. I am totally buying Penn State winning the Big Ten this year.
Yeah, only 5 teams in the Big Ten are expected to start their primary 2024 starter, and Penn State being one of those programs. You already alluded to Michigan and what they were able to do last year in beating Ohio State, because by Michigan standards, it was a down year, and still they pulled off a win against the Buckeyes. So Michigan extends their win streak against Ohio State as it appears to be Bryce Underwood time. Are you buying or selling that?
I'm selling it, and I know a lot of people will sit there and go, what proves that they can actually go beat Michigan, let alone have to go to Ann Arbor this year and snap that losing streak. But I think at this point, you got to get off the schneid at some point, and they're going to do it this year. I think the big issue there, as with Michigan, as you just mentioned, they're going to have a true freshman at quarterback. By the end of this season, he might as well be a sophomore. But I think Ohio State, because they're so motivated, they've lost 4 straight. Practically everybody in that program who's not a transfer has never beaten them. And that's really sticking under their skin right now. And I'll tell you what, one player that really upsets is Jeremiah Smith, the superstar receiver, losing the way they did last year, and then also them really shutting him down in the second half of that 13-10 loss. There are a lot of players who were not just primary players last year, but guys that just are sick of losing to Michigan this year that are super talented. I think that they go into Ann Arbor this year and they finally beat the Wolverines. And I would hate to see what the chatter's like in Columbus if they lose a fifth straight time to Michigan, despite winning a national title last year. I mean, goodness gracious. I mean, back in December before the playoff even started, people were talking about, should Ryan Day be fired? Then he goes on and wins 4 straight and wins a national championship. And he's 70-10 overall in his career. But again, Michigan's in his side. I think Ohio State, maybe they're not a national championship program this year, but I think that they'll get back in the good graces of the Ohio State fans by finally beating Michigan.
Yeah, because even if you don't win a natty, if you go and beat Michigan, that's almost like the same thing to Ohio State fans. And in the reverse, Michigan fans, they care about beating Ohio State almost more than they do than winning it all. So finally, let's talk about the Big Ten as a whole. We saw 4 Big Ten teams make the CFP in 2024. So, Brandon, are you buying the notion that 4 Big Ten teams are going to make the CFP once again?
No, I'm selling that. I think we'll see 3. I think it's going to be Penn State, Ohio State, and then a wild card. I know a lot of people are really high on Oregon still. I'm not so much. I could maybe see Indiana actually get back in the playoff once again, or maybe Illinois this year. Illinois is stacked offensively. Their offensive line, defensive lines are phenomenal. I really like Illinois, Indiana to maybe be that 3rd wild card team that gets in. But I think it's going to be pretty difficult for the Big Ten to get 4 teams in this season. I think you're going to see a lot of these programs beat up on each other a little bit. And Oregon is going to be a little bit down. We're so accustomed to seeing them with a senior quarterback. In fact, that matter, like a 19th or 20th year senior, it seems like, with Bo Nix and then Dylan Gabriel. But now they're switching to someone with little to no experience in Dante Moore. They're having to replace a lot on offense. There's going to be some growing pains there at Oregon for the Oregon Ducks. Dan Lanning's never had to really start a true fresh face out there that doesn't have a lot of experience at quarterback. They're going to struggle a little bit. So with that said, 3 teams from the Big Ten, Penn State, Ohio State, and then a wild card, maybe Indiana or Illinois.
We saw Indiana there plus 570 and make the CFP. If Illinois makes the CFP, we're going to have to really watch Tom Fornelli, put a camera on him at all times, because I don't know, I think he's going to freak out. Brandon, we certainly appreciate it bringing us the latest out of Big Ten Media Days in Vegas. And Brandon and our entire 24/7 sports crew, they are the very best at what they do, from recruiting rankings, transfer portal updates, everything you need. Make sure you check them out at 247sports.com.
Back here on CBS Sports HQ, where our coverage of Big Ten Media Days from Las Vegas continue. We learned a lot day 1 yesterday from Commissioner Tony Pate, Ohio State's Ryan Day, and plenty more. But here's a look at the team speaking today. That includes Minnesota, Northwestern, Wisconsin, Washington. We'll hear from Oregon's Dan Lanning, but we zero in on Penn State as head coach James Franklin will be speaking to the media shortly. Penn State has been a team that's just gotten better each year under head coach James Franklin. He holds the most wins in a 3-year span in Happy Valley with 34 ahead of Joe Paterno, but has yet to win a national championship. Key players like quarterback Drew Aller make his return this season. And of course, this running back duo featuring Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. Penn State really returns as a true contender to win the Big Ten, as well as continue to knock on the door of a national championship. For much more on Penn State, let's go ahead and welcome in Danny Kanell and Bryant McFadden live from Big Ten Media Days from Las Vegas. Gentlemen, great to see you. Let's go ahead and begin with the hype that is really valid, BMAC, entering this season for a Penn State team that has just been knocking on the door of a national championship.
No question, Jordan. It's very valid, and the reason why is because they're the most talented team in the Big Ten for this upcoming season, with the best quarterback in the Big Ten. Drew Aller has the most experience. He's been playing at a high level for quite some time. Over the last 2 years, Danny, I think he has 23 wins. So he's been a winner. The issue for Penn State in terms of getting to that next level is capitalizing on opportunities against prime time matchups. That's an issue. When you look at top 5 opponents from a year ago, 0-3. 0-3. The 5-star quarterback in Drew Aller, in those matchups, he completed around 50% of his passes, 3 interceptions, 3 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. That's not winning football. So now when you look at this year with the uncertainty at Ohio State at the quarterback position, the same can be said for Oregon at the quarterback position. This has to be Penn State's year. You don't get Michigan. You get Oregon there in Happy Valley and you go to Ohio State late in November, you have to like this makeup when you look at the experience and most notable, the quarterback in Drew Aller. So me personally, I agree. This has to be their year.
There's a reason they're the favorite, and they're the reason they're going to get picked to win the Big Ten for all those things that you mentioned. But I feel like Drew Aller has more pressure on him than any player in the entire country because of what you mentioned. On the biggest stages, he has disappeared. Whether it was against Ohio State, whether it was against Notre Dame in the playoffs, the biggest stages, he hasn't played great. And he's amassed incredible stats. He's been really good when he has an advantage. But when it's even par and when he's got to step up and be a difference maker, that to me is the difference that he has to be this season, because it's going to be challenging, but they've got everything there coming back for him. They've got his second year with Andy Colton-Nicky, the offensive coordinator, so he should be more comfortable. They went out and added some depth at the wide receiver position because that was an issue last year. But now he doesn't have Tyler Warren, his favorite target, the tight end that's now playing in the NFL. So I think a lot of this season hinges on Drew Aller, but I love the experience he brings, and I do think he's ready to take that next step.
They're in an incredible spot entering this season, and it all starts and ends really with quarterback Drew Aller. So let's stay here for a moment. Danny, coming back to you on this, QB to QB, in addition to showing up on that big stage, these primetime games, where else do you have to see Aller really take the next step in his game if this team wants to go on and compete and ultimately win a national championship?
Really, I mean, the difference to me in being good and great is when you're off script, right? A lot of quarterbacks can go through their progressions. They're smart. They know who to get the football to. And I thought I saw it last year against USC. That was Drew Aller's best game that he had last year. And there was a multiple fourth down conversions when they needed him against USC. He came up big in that game. And a lot of them were scrambles when he had to get out of trouble, and all of a sudden he just tucks the ball and runs it. Others were outside the pocket. Same thing in the Big Ten championship game that he played against Oregon. I know they lost the game, and that game was kind of out of hand, and he kind of kept them in it, kept it competitive. But I did like the fact that he was a little bit more freewheeling. It's almost, I think Drew Aller's biggest thing is I would like to see him take more risks and take more shots down the field. But then when you give him that opportunity, like they did at Notre Dame in the 2-minute drill at the end of the game, they're like, let's go win this thing, and he throws an interception. It's just you got to see him be the difference for Penn State. And it's probably only going to have to happen maybe 2-3 games this year, because they're going to be a significantly more talented team than most of the teams they play against. But on the biggest stage, what does he do?
Become more of a playmaker in those moments. Because the thing about Drew Aller, I love his pocket presence in the pocket. He can make every throw that you need a quarterback to make. But sometimes, Drew, it's okay to take the football and say, everyone move out of the way. He's very, very athletic. I would love to see him become more of a +1 in the running game, either QB designs or just improvising on the fly when things are not there. And the route concepts, take off and utilize your athleticism. When you look at some of the high-level quarterbacks, even going back to a year ago, when you look at Will Howard for Ohio State, when he started running the football, that provided another element for what they faced off against in the national championship game. As a former defender, I hated playing against quarterbacks that could become a +1 in the running game, because it's like trying to defend 12 instead of 11. You don't have the numbers to do that. And Drew Aller has that ability, and it's okay to become a playmaker and say, hey, everyone move out of the way. Route concepts are not there. Let me utilize my athleticism, get down, get positive yards.
You guys, going ahead and looking at this schedule, B-Mac, I want to go ahead and pull it up for you. The biggest challenge for Penn State will really be a road trip to Ohio State, as you mentioned earlier, and then, of course, getting Oregon at home for a primetime whiteout game. Dare I say, B-Mac, this schedule is quite favorable for the Nittany Lions.
That's why I stated earlier, Jordan, Danny, and I'm saying this to Penn State fans as well, this has to be your year. Enough is enough. We know so many Penn State fans that have seen this movie over and over and over again. It used to be, before the merger of the Pac-12 teams, you couldn't beat Ohio State and Michigan. Now in comes Oregon. Oregon kind of gave you that same mindset a year ago. Well, this year you don't play Michigan. You get Oregon with a new quarterback there at the crib. Whiteout game, primetime stage. Early in the season, while Oregon is still trying to figure things out, you got to take advantage of that opportunity. And then you go to Columbus in November with the more experienced team along with the quarterback. You have to do it. This has to be your year because you're getting the best teams in your conference with unknowns at the quarterback position. Change over coaching personnel with Ohio State. So if you're James Franklin, enough is enough. We don't want to see the same movie we've seen in years past. We know the ending. Penn State fans will always cry. They want to cheer and jump for joy and take shots.
You know what's interesting about that schedule? They're almost a lock to get into the playoffs. I don't see them stumbling and having 9-3, 10-2. If they don't beat Oregon or Ohio State, it becomes a little bit with the weak non-conference. Do they get in? But I think they get one of those. I think they're a lock to get in the playoffs. Then it's how do you respond the way Ohio State did last year? Remember, Ohio State limped into the playoff. They lost 2 games in the regular season, including against Michigan, who was having a down year last year. But they responded. You mentioned it. Will Howard steps up big against Tennessee and against Oregon out there in the Rose Bowl. That's, to me, is what's going to elevate this team. And, you know, talking with Ryan Day yesterday, he was talking about how they managed the regular season and how they tweaked little things so they're peaking at the right time. That's the thing I think is going to be critical for Penn State this year is to manage the adversity and make sure that when it's time to peak in the playoffs, that's when they peak. Because that narrative is still not gone away that James Franklin can't beat a top 5 team because they still haven't.
Yeah, no denying Penn State is preparing for one of the more anticipated seasons in program history. And BMAC, the pressure is on because he's just hyping it up. So hopefully they do deliver this year. The bar has really been raised. BMAC, we know you're picking Penn State to win the Big Ten this year, and they will go on to meet expectations. Danny, are you on the same page?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't like when I'm on board with everybody, but I think they are the pick. I think it's pretty clear cut. Like, I think everybody else, you're trying to make a case that Julian Sands going to be good, or Dante Moore is going to be good for Oregon, or they're going to fill a lot of the missing pieces they have. Penn State doesn't have those question marks, and with the new offensive and defensive coordinator, Ohio State, I do think Penn State is the pick to go with. If the smart money should be on Penn State. That being said, I would not bet the house on it because I still need them to go out there and do something they haven't done.
BMAC, are you going to the table and you're putting some money down then?
I love the value. Yeah, I mean, plus 230. They should be the favorites, but they're not. But you have to love the value with Penn State. For everything that Danny's mentioned, the same for me. Quarterback, you take. James Franklin, you take. Experienced defense, you take. They have it. They have it. And you get one of the best teams in the Big Ten at home early in the year. Like, what? This has to be their year. And Danny, you said something that was so impactful for me. I don't know if you guys heard him, but I heard him. Even if they have a slip up against one of the 2 powerhouses in the Big Ten, they still get into the playoffs. So it's almost like if you win the games you're supposed to win, and if you have a slip up against one of the perennial powerhouses in Ohio State and Oregon, you still get in. You still have a shot, even if you don't go flawless in the regular season. So if you know you got a for sure seat in the tournament, you got to make something happen. You cannot have these letdowns after letdowns after letdowns. It's not good for people's blood pressure, especially their Penn State fans.
No, okay.
What gets really interesting, Jordan, real quick, what's gets really interesting, if they don't beat either one of those, they don't beat Oregon or Ohio State, and they're sitting at 10-2, that is going to be a rough case for them to make because their non-conference is so weak, and that's been such a popular conversation. I do think they have to win one of those. I do think they do. But my goodness, that'll be an interesting debate.
It's too soon for that, Danny. Why are you throwing that out?
Hey, Danny, get your guy under control and make sure he has that same energy as we talk about our alma mater next. You guys stay put. More from our guys in Vegas, but you can watch Penn State and the entire Big Ten on CBS this season. It returns August 30th on CBS, or you can stream on Paramount+.